Now, the Prime Minister David Cameron is making a speech in London at about this moment in which he's saying that thousands more English schools could be taken over by academies if the Conservatives win the election. At the moment, the deal is that only schools rated as inadequate can be converted to academies. But the Prime Minister wants to extend that to primaries and secondaries that merely require improvement. You might say, well, that's all of them. Has your child's school become an academy? How do we judge if it works or not? Is it a glittering beacon of educational success after languishing as a council-run mediocrity for decades? Or perhaps the new academy descended into chaos and you long for the local authority to look after it again? We're going to discuss this in a moment, but first here's our reporter Tim Johns.
It was the previous government which started the Academy Schools programme. Originally it was small in scale and intended for failing schools only.
When a school becomes an academy, there's only one focus: the children.
Michael Gove spent much of his time as Education Secretary pushing what he called the Academies movement. In 2010, there were just 200 academies in England. Now, more than 4,300. A whopping 55% of secondary schools now have academy status. But is that for the best? OK, class, settle down. Hands up if you've got a question. Yes, you.
What's the best thing about being an academy school?
Well, it's probably this.
I want to break free!
Freedom from local authority control is the biggie. Academies can sort of do what they like. They can manage their budgets however they choose and pay exceptional teachers exceptional salaries. They can amend the curriculum they teach. They can decide the length of the school day and even the term dates. Here's that Michael Gove chap again.
It relies not on central direction by politicians. The Academies movement is all about liberating and emancipating teachers and teaching leaders.
Yes, you at the back.
So, do people in academies end up with better grades then?
Well, this guy's Nick Gibb. He's an education minister. He seems to think so.
The converted academies across the whole system, they are improving both their Key Stage 2 and their GCSE results faster than in local authority schools.
Although Tristram Hunt, the Shadow Education Secretary, disagrees.
As a Select Committee report said last week, there's no evidence to suggest that simply converting a school from a maintained or local authority status to academy status improves the results for young people.
So, make up your own mind. You, in the green jumper with the greasy hair.
What do people who don't like academies say?
Well, some people think they just cause a mess. You know where you are with the local authority schools. Standard pay grades for all, the same curriculum across the country, uniformity and fairness for all. Academies have so much autonomy that they can vary wildly. And who remembers the Trojan horse scandal? Yeah, well, that took place in academy schools. Many people think they're totally under-regulated. Then there's money. Last year, the Institute of Education did some research which found many financial irregularities, such as one academy head teacher who paid 50 grand for a one-day training course run by a mate. Right, class over, get out, take your rubbish with you, and do your homework.
Thank you, Tim Johns, playing teacher there, telling us some things about academies and council-run schools. We wondered what you think is best. You may be a governor, teacher, parent, ex-pupil. You know what works best in your neighbourhood. Let's talk to Jonathan Simons, Head of Education at the Policy Exchange think tank, and Jamie Kelsey-Fry, former secondary teacher, contributing editor of the New Internationalist magazine. You don't like this, the way things are going, Jamie?
No, I don't. Surprise, surprise, I don't know. There's lots of reasons, and some of them were touched on just then. Obviously, the idea of them being very unregulated and all kinds of wild ideas can be played with in schools by people who are running the academy. And, of course, the people who really lose out on this are young people. And just now you were saying, it'd be interesting to hear from parents. Obviously, you parents out there who've gone through these situations, it'd be great if you can give us your opinions about academies versus state. But it'd be great to hear from young people themselves. They're often the experts that we never actually get to hear from. They're the ones who knows what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, but why do you have a problem with them being unregulated?
OK, because if they're unregulated, you can have a situation like the Trojan horse situation.
But that's quite unusual.
Well, we don't necessarily know that. You know, there's an opportunity maybe for sort of faith-backed organisations to run academy schools, and there's a big temptation for their science lesson to suddenly start talking about the fact that maybe God invented the world and Darwin was Satan. You know,
yeah, Jonathan Simons. Okay, let's start with that. Academies are not regulated as strongly, and therefore you get schools that are just crackers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice line. It's just not true, unfortunately. So academies are regulated in exactly the same way that every other school is. You can't teach creationism in science lessons. They're audited every year for their financial accounts.
Trojan horse was academies?
Trojan horse was academies and local authority schools. So the Trojan horse was
actually...
Was
it
yeah,
both?
it was. Yeah, it was both. It was a very, very specific example.
Jamie, that nixes your point completely.
It still doesn't get away from the fact that they can chop and choose what kind of curriculum they teach, okay?
Is that right?
So those curriculums are very carefully worked out.
Jonathan Simons, let's just, again, stick on that for a moment. Isn't it dangerous if they can go their own way on the curriculum?
Well, on the very specific point of can they teach creationism in science? No, they can't. That's specifically banned. Can they teach flexibly in the way that they think's best in order to get their children through the exams? Yes, they can. And actually, I think that's a good thing. That's why most people, in fact, argue that non-academies should be able to do exactly the same thing.
Jamie, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with the schools saying, we want to teach German or Chinese?
Well, schools can choose to do that. State schools choose to teach Chinese and German, obviously. Most state schools do. But what's the heart of it here is that we have people who are not imbued with the knowledge about what education really is and how it works and why these curriculums have been worked out the way they are. They haven't been arbitrarily knocked out by a couple of people whose expertise is in plastering. They're people who are real experts in what teaching is. So for people who are not experts in education, people who are not teachers, including Jonathan actually, for them to actually think they know better about what forms a good education for young people is just an insult. It's an insult to parents, but particularly it's an insult to young people.
So your main worry, Jamie, is that you've got the wrong kind of staff in there. Is that right?
That's just for starters. There's a lot of worries. I mean, there's a much more obvious one, which is the commodification of knowledge. If you've got organisations that are running schools and their ultimate aim is... It's a private company. Sorry, folks, but they just want to make money.
They want to make money, Jonathan.
I mean, this is just the kind of classic scare stories that you always get with academies. So here's a few facts. Fact number one, academies are not allowed to make a profit, just like any other school. Fact number two, the vast amount of people who are running academies are charities, they're philanthropists, they're sponsors. But importantly, they're not running the school. Head teachers run the school, and they employ teachers, and teachers teach, and they choose the curriculum. All we're talking about with academies is a group of individuals who want to do something slightly different, who use their greater flexibilities. And as people listening to this show will know, whose children are in academies up and down the land, academies are transforming life chances, particularly for some of the children in the poorest area of the country.
What about when teachers are employed by academies who don't have the kind of credentials that Jamie would recognise?
Well, again, let's start with saying that's 4% of teachers. So this is not a big deal. But if a head teacher sees a candidate and he or she thinks, this is the right kind of person, I think that they're a good person for the school, I think they can teach a topic, I think they can get the children through the exams, then it's up to them. Don't forget, the head teachers are really held accountable here. They're not just going to pick somebody off the street. Because if they can't teach and they can't get through the exams, the head teacher's job's on the line.
Jamie, it's the case that there are lots of bad teachers who've been trained, and there are probably, therefore, some quite good teachers who have not been trained.
There are definitely lots of teachers who have been trained who are not good teachers. I'm absolutely sure about that, because I was a teacher for 23 years. But I think the other way around is very unlikely. I don't think there's people who can just get off the street who are brilliant teachers. It's impossible. It's a proper craft. It's a proper skill. A couple of years ago, I was here doing a story with you, and it was about another kind of madcap sort of publicity-seeking scam, because that's what this whole story is from Cameron leading up to the election. And it was about the idea of having schools that were run by ex-servicemen, which is fascinating, because a lot of people were ringing up who were ex-servicemen. They're saying, I've been in Afghanistan, I've been in Northern Ireland, but I'd rather that than actually be in the front line of a classroom. And they're absolutely right. I'm sorry, folks, but 30 young people at 9 o'clock in the morning for 100 minutes, you have to be highly skilled, highly trained. It's an incredibly difficult job. And having this yet another attack on teachers, attack on education, and a kind of publicity stunt is all this is just so predictable and so sad, particularly for young people.
Well,
that's the real problem.
It's not just a publicity stunt, because it's gone from 203 academies in 2010 to 3,000. So whatever you think of it, it's happening. Jonathan, respond.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right, Jeremy. What's happened over the past 4 years is that some of the most dedicated people in the country, philanthropists, businessmen, charities, organisations, have come together at no benefit financially to themselves to support schools out of nothing other than a kind of public service duty.
Could they be ego-tripping?
Yeah, sure, but I don't have a problem with that.
You don't mind that?
I don't have a problem with that if they're improving children's life chances. That's the only thing that matters here. The real question is, what's the most likely scenario to get children to have life chances, wherever they come from? The fact of the matter is there are still too many children from low-income backgrounds that aren't doing well and who are being failed by the current school system. The academy system offers a chance for something slightly different to operate. And we know, if we look at schools in London now that have become academies, particularly some of those who are run by the biggest chains, something like the Arc chain or the Harris chain, phenomenal results. Real children, real lives, phenomenal increases in results.
Jamie, hang on. The biggest academy chain, which is the Academy's Enterprise Trust, was judged to be failing to give pupils an adequate education by Ofsted.
Yeah.
So it's messed, and that's the biggest one.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But also the report that the Education Select Committee report that just came out also said there's absolutely no evidence to show that it's improving.
That's not true. A study by... Sorry, I'm going to go back the other way.
Well, I've got
a
it
study
in
by the
front of me.
London School of Economics found there was a significant improvement in the percentage of pupils who achieved the equivalent of 5 or more A to C grade GCSEs at a newly converted academy.
But that's like a battle of reports, isn't it?
Well,
'Cause the LSE says that.
Well,
the
maybe just go on feel then. Just go on your impression.
No, the Education Select Committee, which we were discussing just before we came on, Jonathan and I, are very clear that it's too early to know, but there's no evidence to show that there's a major improvement in results. But look, I'm a teacher, okay, and that makes a big difference to the person who we're talking to, right? The fact is, and I know almost all teachers will agree with this out there, it's not just the grades. The grades are very important, but a great teacher is going to turn out a well-rounded, confident young person who's able to take on the world and be a positive member of society. That's incredibly important. Now, if you turn this around and look at the way the academies function, all right, and it's interesting that Jonathan said, that they're not allowed to make money, but there's a lot of reports of, academy group takes somewhere over and they start kind of selling off the football fields and stuff like that. And you just read, your reporter himself just read an incredible story about a head of an academy who was caught giving 50,000 quid to a mate of his for a workshop. As soon as you have the element of making money out of this, you are destroying education.
All right, just one more area for you both to quickly discuss, which is whether it's better to have control at the council level or at the government level. And Jonathan, this is the problem, isn't it, with your argument for academies, which is that councils stop having eyes on local schools. That's the problem.
I don't want either government or councils. I want head teachers and boards of governors looking after schools.
But a head teacher has a particularly blinkered view about his or her school. The council at least can say, look, we've got 20 schools, and this is how they need to work with each other.
Well, there's two separate issues here. The first is, should schools be working together? Of course they can. But that happens already, and that happens with academies. The vast majority of academies are already working with their local schools. Your second question is, are the council some sort of benign local overseer? And of course they're not. Because when the council are also running schools, they've got a conflict of interest. They're both running the schools and they're overseeing high standards.
And
we know that there are schools that have been languishing in what's called special measures, the lowest grade, for months and years at a time because the council hasn't taken swift enough action.
Jamie,
that's not acceptable.
Better to have it run at council level or government level?
I'm out on both sides.
But you don't like the council.
Well, no. What's really important is that it's all worked together. So, in other words, all schools stick to the same curriculum. Once you have small groups that are trying to make money, like running areas of schools, then it's just totally disorientating for teachers, for the education system as a whole, and for young people. But what's much more important is let's look at a more decent solution. Okay, a much more obvious solution is you have to cut the numbers of pupils in classrooms, class sizes, and what you want to do is look at the charity status of private schools, public schools.
Oh God, we've gone on to another one. Okay,
yeah, but
thank you.
if you want to have a good
right
education
at the end of the
kids,
discussion as well.
Less people in the classroom.
Thank you very much, Steve.
All the parties should be doing.
Jamie Kelsey-Fry, former secretary teacher, Jonathan Simons, head of education at the Policy Exchange think tank. It's Radio 2 talking about academies.